I met John Mills, award-winning poet and retired English teacher from Stoke-on-Trent, at an open mic event at Southgate Bookstore in Walsall. Later on, I met his wife, Liz Mills, who also writes poetry. They attend such events, workshops, and poetry readings all over the country together, and other poets find them inspiring.
I was an English teacher, so I was constantly working with poetry. I've worked with poetry pretty much all my life. And it's been a focal point. It's great, poetry is. It doesn't give you any answers, but it sorts out your thinking. I wrote when I was a teenager, terrible love poetry. And then I wrote a lot of songs. And then about 15 years ago I started writing poetry. And then about 8 years ago I started writing decent poetry.
The Graveyard Shift is the time when lonely DJs play country and western, eulogies of Fardo like misery. He was her man, but he done her wrong, drifts unheard over empty airways. I love writing poetry, but when I come to the end of a poem I think, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to write anything again. And sometimes I write 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things in a week, and then I can't write again for a month. But it comes back to me eventually. And I've got books all over the place, on the floor, files there. But I write by hand. I like the connection between the brain, the hand, the pen and the paper. It's one of the worst symptoms for me of Parkinson's, in that my handwriting has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And now it's very, very, very small indeed. And I have to think about signing my own name and how to form the letters. And I find that's perhaps the one thing about Parkinson's disease which really gets to me. And sometimes when I'm writing a poem, I write quickly and I can't read what I've written afterwards. And I don't fight the disease. You can't fight it. It's not an equal battle. It will win. But I'm very fortunate in the respect that I came to terms with having it early on. If you ask the question, why me? You have to ask the question, why not?
I can see your collection of guitars and instruments on the wall.
I've been involved with music all my life. I started off as a choir boy when I was 7. I did a spell as a cathedral chorister, and I've been in love with the guitar all my life. I don't have enough. I want more. This one here, if you can, I'll get it down. It's a sitar, which is an old English instrument, and my aunt, who was a church organist and a really skillful player, died and left me some money. And I thought the best way to remember her was to have an instrument built. And I had this built in them. And every time I play it I can think of her. But when I bought it I thought it's great. Then I got it and I thought I don't even know how to tune it in. So I had to teach myself absolutely everything about the instrument. But it's beautiful. This is a newish one. I had 2 other guitars now to get rid of them because the neck is too thin for me. Because with Parkinson's I need a bit more room on the neck. So I bought this Seagull. And I really like that. That's a handmade Spanish guitar from Granada, and that's an old Norman. But I like them on the wall because I can just pick them up and play them. 5 minutes, put them back. Every year at school I had a different band, depending on what the kids' interests were. So we played folk, we played jazz, we played rock, we played whatever we could. And I would play bass, maybe electric rhythm guitar and things like that. We just had a bit of fun. The biggest challenge was the paperwork. Short-term, medium-term and long-term planning. The kids were great. I loved dealing with the kids. I taught one girl, Laura Salt, and she would ambush me at dinner time, and she'd call me Millsy. Yeah, she said, "Millsy, you're wrong." I said, "Come in here." And we'd thrash out a bit of something about Shakespeare or some poetry, and sometimes she'd bring in reinforcements, so I'd get the head of sixth form to come in, and it was great. It was great because it was an intellectual pursuit, if you like, and the only thing that we were trying to do was to get to the truth of the literature, and that's great.
leaving the two cats behind, one very playful, as you can surely see, and the other one in a rather sleepy mood on the floor. We went to Liz and John's favourite cafe in town, the Secret Tearooms.
I think we're at this table here.
Yeah.
I thought it was hilarious because she says, and she wants to know a question. It's really special to me to drink out of this. I love drinking from this cup and saucer because it reminds me of when I had a cup of tea in Iceland at my mother's relatives, and the tea that I drank was from my great-grandmother's cup and saucer, and it just felt so close and so special. And this is very much like the cup and saucer that I had there. My grandfather's sister was a nurse in the First World War, and she married a translator who was an Icelandic bookseller. And after the war, they married and went back to Iceland. And she had four children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. So one of her sons, Steini, ran away at the beginning of the Second World War to join the Royal Air Force, and he became the only Icelandic Spitfire pilot. You sat by the bar, strong chin, dancing eyes, oozing charisma. Over your shoulder, a younger man, dancing eyes, sensual lips, used charisma to attract one girl after another. Were you an adventure seeker, brave, or merely foolhardy? Spitfires and women changing with the moon, children with 4 mothers, all united by your steadfast paternity. The defeated helped in Berlin, the hungry fed in war-torn Biafra, pilgrims safely delivered to Mecca, an airport in Iceland, places your proud grandmother knew little of.
Those 2 women over there, they're superb. They're always lively, entertaining and cheerful.
We caught you.
They're from Stoke, and they're typical Stokies, and I'm from Stoke. And I love them.
Hey, I'm proud of that.
Me too, me too.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
So these houses were built in the very early days of the Second World War for munitions workers who worked at Swinnerton, about 5 miles away, and came from all over the country. Many came from London, many came from Scotland. They were sent here to work, so houses had to be built for them. My house was this house in the corner. We moved in 1967. And when I moved here, there were still lots and lots of neighbours who'd worked at Swinnerton and had lived here since the 50s or the 40s. Everybody knew everybody else. They were fascinating houses. The front little room of each house was an air raid shelter. And you had to take a step down to get into it, and it was completely built of concrete. Well, the house is pretty much built of concrete, the stairs are concrete, but these rooms had no windows and were supposed to be bomb-proof. And the idea behind it all was this road here is wide with big grass verges, and from the air it was supposed to look like an airport, and this was supposed to be the runway. And the idea was that if the Germans came looking for the ordnance factory at Swinnerton, they would find this and they would bomb this with the workers in it, rather than bombing the factory and destroying all the armaments. Ghastly story.
Back to their house, Liz took me to her garden to talk a little bit about her creative side, which John praises in many words.
I love my garden, but not so much the washing on the line. When we moved in, which was 4 years ago, the garden was just two very boring pieces of lawn with a path in between and nothing. And it was so far from flat that my grandson couldn't even kick a football because it would just roll down to the other side. So it was clear something had to be done. So I sketched an idea of what I wanted to a friend who was a gardener. And I said I wanted lots of curves on this side, no straight lines at all. And on the other side, I wanted to have plenty of raised beds so that I could grow vegetables. And between us, this is what we came up with, and I love it. Absolutely love it.
Do you spend a lot of time in your garden then?
Not as much time as I would like to. I've been banned from digging now because of my hip problem. So I have to pay somebody else to do the heavy work. But yes, I do spend a lot of time apart from that. And we sit out here a lot. And then we built a summer house, which has got electricity in it, and a fridge for the carver or the white wine. So we spend a lot of evenings out here too.
With your writing, you said you started to write poetry only about 3 years ago. What inspires you to write?
I've written about my garden. At first I wrote quite sad poems about my parents, about my father, who was a hard man, and my mother and the sad way in which she died. But that's moved on now, and more than anything now I write about women, women through history and the lives they've led. And the latest idea that's bumbling around in my head is about my sister's mother-in-law, who was from a tiny island called Carriacou off Grenada, near Venezuela, right down south in the Caribbean. And she was an amazing woman, so I want to get her story down.
Speaking about your creativity and stage work, and there are little things all over the house that show your creative side.
Yes, I just really enjoy making miniatures because it involves every creative art you can think of, from making tiny curtains and putting PVA glue with water on them so that you can make creases look natural, working with wood, shrinking papers to make them look tiny, all of those things. It's great fun. And of course, I can involve the historical interests by doing, for instance, Tudor buildings.
Did you have a lot of little dolls and toys when you were growing up?
Not at all. In fact, I didn't like dolls. My dolls were kept in a drawer, which my mum thought was awful, so that my books could be kept on top of the cupboard. I was far more interested in books than dolls. So, yeah, but I suppose it's partly history and partly a way to think about people's lives and look in people's lives. Don't particularly like to put figures in my my room boxes. I prefer them to look as if somebody's just stepped out of the room. I was in the middle of working on a play.
The Philanthropist.
The Philanthropist. I'd designed the set with help. I'd made the props for the play. In fact, most of the furniture from my house was on the set.
The first time I went round to your house, there was nothing in the dining room.
No. So I went out with a friend to console her because her engagement had just broken up. And she said on the way about the people who would be at the pub. And she said, "John will be there. He's an English teacher too. He goes on a bit, but you'd probably like him."
Ever since then, I've not been able to get a word in edgeways.
We talked about Dylan Thomas and Under Milkwood all night, didn't we? And I talked about the play that I was doing and bullied you into buying a ticket.
Yeah, but I've been passionate about theatre all my life. In point of fact, I made my debut on stage before I was born. My mum was 6 months pregnant with me.
As the fallen angel.
Well, yeah, I wasn't going to go into that, but carry on. I mean, we seem to hit it off like hammer and chisel. and we, out of desperation, arranged to see each other again, and that was it.
3 months later we were living together. 6 months after that we were married.
Just goes to show, lads, don't relax.
So there is no competition then in your house about who's writing, doing what creatively?
Absolutely none. No, we support each other, don't we?
Well, you can't be competitive because let's say we're writing about our own relationship. It'll be from different points of view, so it can't be competitive. It simply can't. It just has to be mutually supportive.
But I was far more interested in actually performing poetry, other people's poetry, or in plays.
But we've always been active, haven't we? We can't not be involved in something. We were on a campsite and the girl said to us, "I like you. You're old, but you do things."
That was when we'd done 1,000 miles on a motor scooter in the Sierra Nevada up and down the hills. It was fantastic.
We only crashed once.
Yes, it was an exciting crash. It was at about 3 miles an hour, and we just tipped up very slowly, and we both thought, we're going to fall off.
And then Liz said, "I'm all right," and I panicked because she usually screams and shouts if a fleck of dust lands on her. So I thought she must be dying if she said "I'm all right."
We laugh all the time, don't we?
Yeah.
We make each other laugh. We're silly. Are you all right?
Yes.
We care about each other too, you see. Well,
Sometimes as a defensive mechanism as well. I'm not quite as confident as I always seem, and humour is a way of bridging a gap for me.
and we've approached your illness with a lot of humour, haven't we?
As I was saying earlier, you have to accept it. It's not going to go away, and if humour's a way of coming to terms with it, well, I'll make a joke out of it. And similarly, in terms of humour, in the poetry I do, I can get over a lot of really, really serious points through humour. If I just sat there or stood there and said, "Parkinson's really horrible, it does this to you, that to you," people have stopped listening. If I make them laugh, they carry on listening.
Once you've come to terms with something like that happening, you learn to accept whatever life throws at you, and you also learn, more importantly, to grab what's going when it's going and to enjoy every day, and that's what we do, isn't it?